Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life, not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter at vmspod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. You can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/vmspod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from that month's guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/vmspod and patronize me. Our guest this episode is John Holl, and that's Holl. He's the editor of All About Beer magazine and author of Dishing Up New Jersey, 150 Recipes from the Garden State, which is just coming out this month from Story Publishing. That's Story with an E in the middle, Storey. As should be obvious from the title, this is a cookbook. And we talk about how I have interviewed fiction writers, nonfiction writers, and artists, and I have not interviewed a cookbook writer yet. So this is our first time. This is some of the flap copy to give you an idea of what Dishing Up New Jersey is about. Garden State native John Holl combed New Jersey's 21 counties to find these mouth-watering recipes from beloved diners, boardwalks, food trucks, farm stands, and four-star restaurants. Italian, Puerto Rican, Polish, Chinese, and Indian flavors bubble up through the state's storied melting pot in this rich collection, rounded out by disco fries and funnel cake. With a focus on local produce, this is the ultimate tribute to New Jersey's best. Now, I would not normally seem like the cookbook guy because I am a absolute goddamn disaster in the kitchen. You can envision like the bowl of cereal with like a mushroom cloud coming out of it as I try pouring milk in. It's about that level. But the thing is, my wife is A, a really good cook, and B, the photographer for this book. And that's how I came to learn about it and to meet John. Basically, the two of them traveled around to do shoots at a bunch of different restaurants and other locations in New Jersey, as well as a big event at John's place where he cooked up a lot of the dishes that are featured in the book. And she said, trust me, he's a smart guy, funny story. He'd make a great guest for the podcast. And as it turns out, she was right. And her pictures look absolutely beautiful in this book, by the way. Again, that's Dishing Up New Jersey. So we met up prior to John's book signing this weekend at Carton Brewing Company in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. The owner is a guy named Augie Carton, and John talks about him during the episode. He wrote the foreword to Dishing Up New Jersey, and the brewing company has a pretty awesome vibe. The downstairs is, I guess, the brewery side itself. Upstairs is a sort of bar, but really funky kind of location, as well as the office where we did the recording. Now, my one caveat about recording at Carton Brewing Company is that, we were sitting in the office in this upstairs, which is this funky bar sales area. They had music going the whole time, so I couldn't really isolate the background noise and eliminate it the way I try to do with most episodes. So if there's a little hiss in the background and, changing music and stuff, sorry, that's the price of recording on location. John and Augie actually put out a weekly beer podcast called Steal This Beer, which you should also check out if you're a drinker. I'm not, but I still enjoy the vibe and the kind of social fun of the podcast from the few episodes I did for research here. Anyway, here's John's bio from the flap copy for Dishing Up New Jersey. There's a longer version on his website, johnholl.com. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's Holl, and if I say Holl, you'll think it's Hole. If I say Holl, you'll think it's Hall. So it's right in the middle, JohnHoll.com. John Holl is a New Jersey native and covered the Garden State for the New York Times and the Star-Ledger. He is the award-winning editor of All About Beer magazine, the author of the American Craft Beer Cookbook, and a syndicated newspaper columnist. Holl is an avid home cook and lives in Jersey City. His exit is 14C. And now, the Virtual Memories Conversation with John Holl. I've done novels on this show. I've done nonfiction. I've done all sorts of art books and stuff. This is the first cookbook we've actually had on the show. Tell me about it and where it comes from and what the whole premise behind it is. So.
I've been a reporter pretty much my entire life. I started in a newsroom when I was 16 at the New Jersey Network, which is a former public broadcasting station that the state ran until Christie shut it down a couple of years ago. But I was 16, and on my second day in the newsroom, a reporter shoved a notebook in my back pocket and said, "Come on, we're going out." And it was that afternoon that I met Governor Whitman for the first time. I went to a press conference for the first time. And from that point on, it really began a career of me traversing the state. And so after NJN, I was working at the New York Times for a bunch of years. I worked covering the state. I worked for the Star-Ledger covering the state. And so I got to really travel around. And the thing that I really loved about traveling was being able to try local delis, local restaurants, local coffee shops, everything in between. I mean, Jersey is a great food state. So dishing up New Jersey...
It's not just Taylor ham.
It's not just Taylor ham. No, it's... but dishing up New Jersey is really sort of my love letter to the state. And I really feel that Jersey has the most diverse food culture out there. And
what do you think accounts for that?
I think, Ellis Island is based in Jersey. Mm-hmm. So all the immigrants who came in didn't actually come to New York. They came to Jersey first. Ellis Island is in Jersey water. Yeah. And so I think that it's the cities, it's the immigrants, it's the farm culture. It's Jersey is so much, right? So western parts of the state and down south, you have great farmlands, and then you come.
I was
going to
say hillbillies, but it's okay.
Well, it's. Are you from Jersey?
I'm from Ringwood. Yeah,
okay.
I've lived here my entire life.
Okay,
northern New Jersey, but on the border.
You normally
of the
don't
West.
hear Jersey people slamming residents in that way. So I was getting ready to break a bottle and start a fight,
which would be the Jersey way.
Well, and that's how we settle our scores here. No, but when you think about the farmlands and everything from great tomatoes and corn to blueberries and cranberries down in the Pine Barrens to the shore with such wonderful seafood, and then we have a great population of Korean immigrants up in Bergen County, and you have Cuban immigrants in Hudson County, and you have the Italians all over the place and the Irish all over the place. There's so many different food cultures that have been passed down and food traditions that have been passed down over time. And then once you start to get into some of the cities as well, where there's a lot of great modern cuisine that's being pushed forward in places like Hoboken and Jersey City and New Brunswick. And so there's really this great diversity of our food. And that's the fun thing about the book, is that it covers everything that people think of Jersey. So the first recipe in the book is actually just a buttered roll. And the publisher gave me a really hard time on this. They're like, why are we... It's 2 ingredients. It's you put butter on a roll and you wrap it in wax paper. And I said, yeah, but a Jersey cookbook would not be authentic unless that's how it started. And that's on the very simple end of our tastes. And then as the book really evolves, I mean, there's some really... Everything's built towards the home cook, but there's some really ambitious recipes in there that highlight either local produce or sustainable seafood from down the shore, or some great farm raised beef. Jersey really does have it all, and I tried to put it all in the book.
Yeah, what surprised you? What did you find, even from the venues that you went to and some of the foods that came up in the process?
Nothing surprises me in Jersey anymore. It really doesn't. But when I think a lot of it has to do with the history and the return to our old food eating roots. And so there's a Rutgers agricultural station out in Hunterdon County that is bringing back old heirloom varieties of tomatoes that we haven't seen in 100 years. It's not these hot box tomatoes. These are real juicy, ugly tomatoes that are just fantastic to eat. Hunterdon County also has a bison farm.
Okay.
Like you can be driving down 523 or 527 in Hunterdon, and I'm probably wrong on that. It's been a while, and you could see herds of buffalo running along a pen. I think what surprised me was really just how much I do love this state, because you start to take it for granted. And when you get to go and meet food artisans, and you get to hang out at breweries, and you get to hang out with the winemakers and the people who really care about the land and care about being good neighbors, it really reinforces why Jersey is the best state in the nation. And so for me, it was just surprising that like I haven't lost that love for it, that it just hasn't become old hat.
Yeah, how much do you have to defend the state in your day-to-day activities?
Quite a bit. So the day job is running a magazine called All About Beer, and it's a big national magazine. I get to travel the country quite a bit, and I'll meet people, and the first thing you'll hear is, "Oh, Jersey, huh?" It's like, it's only the people from outside of the state who say it like that. It's I've been in Greece, I've been in Spain, I've been in the jungles of Peru, and I've had people reference The Sopranos to me. And it's like, we're not all mobsters. It's
at least 70%, but otherwise,
exactly.
We're
Yeah, it's and we don't really talk about that in Jersey with good reason. So I find myself defending the state quite a bit, and I think it's just because people don't really know. It's Jersey's been the butt of jokes for many times.
Sure.
I make a joke. I think it's on the back of the book in my bio, where I proudly proclaim what my exit is. And I get that question. Oh, what exit? And it's like, well, if I'm going to my parents' house, it's 140 on the Parkway. If I'm going home on the Turnpike, it's 14C. My mother-in-law is now off of 287 on exit 1, and people are,
it's a little more involved.
That's complicated than that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I like to tell people we're out in the wild. I'm 25 miles from New York City, but
right.
I always show them a picture on my phone of a bear walking through somebody's yard about 3 doors down from where I live. And it's not that far from Manhattan,
right.
But, it's deer, bear, wild turkey, all that. Most people get that idea of they flew into Newark or they flew over on the way in and saw industrial wasteland.
Yeah. But, there's actually some as ugly as that can be, there's also some really cool stuff that's happening there. I mean, so much of the goods that are imported from other countries come in through Port Elizabeth, Port Newark.
Right.
I mean, it is one of the most heavily trafficked areas. There are some weird companies, some weird chemical companies that are based in there, but I mean, there's a lot of very important infrastructure that happens in that ugliness, so you have to kind of give that its proper due as well. But you can go from Jersey City and the refineries of Linden to up by you in Ringwood in 90 minutes,
at most.
Yeah, and it's like being transported.
Right. Most people just have that Springsteen industrial wasteland vibe going on. But you mentioned getting started in journalism at 16. Besides the child labor aspect of it, what got you started, and how did you pull it off?
It was the blizzard of '96 of all things.
Oh, I remember that.
The blizzard of '96, and I was home from school, and all of the New York stations went wall to wall with coverage of people standing in the snow. I remember watching Brian Thompson on Channel 4. In New York, standing with his yardstick as snow would pile up wherever. And I thought to myself in January of '96, wow, that's a really cool job, getting to stand out in the snow on TV. And that's really kind of how it happened. And so that summer, I started sending email or handwritten letters or typed letters, I guess, in '96, not email certainly, to all of the news stations in New York, and I included NJN just because I had a list of everybody. And NJN is the only one who got back to me. And I actually dedicated the book to the folks there because they really gave me my start. Bill Jobs and Judy Getz saw my letter. I didn't even have a resume at 16, and they said, let's give the kid a shot. And so I commuted from South Orange to Trenton a couple of days a week. I'd be on the 5 a.m. train so I could be there, and I'd leave after the newscast every night. My dad was cool about letting me get on the train every morning, which was great, and I loved it. I loved every second of it, and I've covered blizzards since then. I know Brian Thompson now from Channel 4. It's all these guys are friends and colleagues after many years. I've covered blizzards. It's something I never have to do again. It's one of the most miserable jobs that's out there.
I firmly believe we've never had one like the one in '96.
Yeah,
because
no,
that was basically 12 hours overnight. And
Yeah.
it was 40 inches out in Ringwood.
It was crazy. But I've covered hurricanes and blizzards and natural disasters and man-made terrorism acts and everything like that since then. But yeah, it started with me watching Brian Thompson and his yardstick.
Yeah. How did the job evolve? How did journalism for you? I know you obviously follow a career arc for it, but at the same time, the industry itself was changing. How did you manage and negotiate that stuff before discovering beer, which we'll get to next?
Yeah. It was interesting because when I first started at 1696, I mean, the internet wasn't really a thing in newsrooms yet.
Right.
And so if you needed directions, you had paper maps, or you'd call the local police department and you'd say, hey, how do I get to Chestnut Street in your town from the Parkway? And it's like, oh, well, you do this. And, they're happy to give out directions because that's a function of what they did.
Yeah.
And now you plug it into your phone and you go from there, and you can have research done at the snap of a finger. And it's made things a lot easier, but I also feel like it's made some reporters a bit lazier. A whole new I feel very fortunate that it's now 20 years that I'm in news. It's 20 years this June. And I feel very fortunate having learned from reporters from the old school, because I recognize the value of walking the pavement and going to a place and taking yourself out of the story and sort of breathing in what's around you, and then trying to put that to the listener, to the reader, to the watcher, however you're communicating. And so it's evolved quite a bit, but I feel like some of the old school tenets are still super important.
Favorite job before your current one, of course, because obviously this is your favorite thing to be doing. Where did you like working the most?
Oh, the Times.
Yeah.
I mean, the New York Times was amazing. It was the daily miracle, but working with some of the greatest journalists on the planet and just watching them and having them teach me, and being afforded the opportunities to travel around quite a bit and to really cover important stories and make an impact. I really feel like it was some of the best journalism that I've ever done, but loved it. Loved every minute of it. And I've never actually had a real job outside of news. I never worked in a mall when I was in high school. I went to TV camp, and it wasn't TV camp, but went to NJN and started there, and I've been in newsrooms ever since. So it's but the Times was a fantastic 8 years.
And then you discovered beer?
Discovered beer when I was at the Times.
I got started your current career.
Yeah, I got to travel around a little bit, and you'd start to realize that rather than staying at the Applebee's in the Holiday Inn lobby in Nacogdoches, Texas, or wherever you were, that you'd find the local brewery. You got better conversation, you got better food, you got better beer, and you also got a really great sense of what the town was about. So if I was in town for breaking news, if I'm sitting at the Applebee's at the Holiday Inn, it's all other business travelers or people from out of town who might be talking about the news of the day, but not with any great context.
Just in a general sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So going to a brew pub, going to a bar, and being able to just sit and listen, you kind of got a better feel of what the city was going through at that point. And then I started to learn a lot about beer, and it was a cool process, and you get to meet the brewers, and if you're at a brew pub, they're making it right in front of you, and I started talking to them. But I never really thought about writing about beer as a real career until about 2008, 2009, when the newspaper industry sort of tanked. And I left the Times. I went to the Star-Ledger. I started writing some more about beer there, in addition to covering Hunterdon County and some other stuff. And then, from there, one thing led to another, and a book deal came along, and then another one, and now I write about beer full time.
Which seems pretty admirable.
Yeah.
How much of a process was it to learn the craft beer culture? And that's going to lead to my question of, what are the schisms within the culture? Is there a Catholic versus Protestant level way of approaching some aspect of it?
I mean, certainly these days, to the second part of your question, there's a lot of craft versus not craft.
Sure.
And it's a very difficult thing to define craft beer. A lot of people say it comes down to size, or it comes down to ownership, or it comes down to any number of things. But essentially these days, it's a lot of the craft brewers have a view of us versus them, and
but there's no us versus us within the middle of that too.
Not yet, but it's getting there.
Gotcha.
People are fighting for shelf space. They're fighting for tap handles. They're fighting for customer dollars. And as new breweries pop up here in Jersey alone, we're going to have 71 by the end of the year. For about 10, 15 years, we had a steady 20, and they were spread out. Most of them were brew pubs, and you didn't really have to worry about it. But now it's they're going to be fighting for space, and so it's a tough thing because the us versus them falls into, you're either Budweiser or Miller or Coors, or you're small and independent and local. But as breweries get purchased, we're seeing Heineken buy breweries, we're seeing Constellation Brands, which owns Corona, buy breweries, and now suddenly they're not craft anymore, but they're in exactly the same space. Now they have more resources. So to the first part of the question, it's for us as journalists to approach this. I really feel that our mission is to cover everything in the same way that I did at NJN, at the Times, at the Ledger, as a journalist. So not necessarily as a beer fan. I enjoy drinking beer. I enjoy most of the time the people that I am talking with. I enjoy the passion behind it, but this is the job where I have to find all sides of the story and then correctly and accurately put it out there. And that's one of the things that is, it can be kind of difficult in this industry. It's unlike any other form of journalism that I've ever done because it's, I'm not covering the industry, I'm also in the industry.
That's the thing. I was a trade magazine editor for, from 1995 to 2014.
Okay.
Then I became a lobbyist, which is really horrifying. But even in that world, doing business-to-business magazines, there was the tension of writing things that might piss off advertisers. In your world, beyond that, there's also the consumer side dynamic to worry about. Is there a sense of juggling those various pressures, or really subsuming everything into the screw it? This is journalism first, and commercial considerations are,
Yeah, that. It's the second part of it. I have a great publisher. Chris Rice is the new owner and publisher of All About Beer magazine, and he has really he understands what we do and lets us do it and gives us the resources to do it. So it's not an advertisers be damned, but if somebody does something wrong, we're not going to shoot it under the rug. If I get from one of my opinion writers an opinion piece and we feel that, hey, this is fair criticism, this isn't just grinding an axe, but this is actually going to make people stop and think, but hey, this is really going to piss off this brewery over here, we gotta run it, and we do. And then I have to see these people. Just this past week was the Craft Brewers Conference down in Philadelphia, and so 13,000 people from the brewing industry, all facets are around. Yeah. And there's a few people who didn't want to see me walking down the hall, and there's a few people who I saw, and I was saying,
we want to talk to you,
or exactly, that's or who want to corner me and say, what the hell is this?
I got that from Pfizer, so don't worry.
That's much bigger than New Belgium Brewing, but it's But I think that if what we've seen is by doing real journalism and by not just covering the craft world, but the name of the magazine is All About Beer. So we do cover Anheuser-Busch and Miller Coors, and we do cover the business aspect of things, and we do cover the raw materials and everything else that before it gets into a glass, we write about and we touch upon. And we're seeing people are very interested in that. And there might be readers who disagree with some of our beer reviews that we do blind, or there might be some people who say like, you're only writing about brewery X or brewery Y because they're so big, or you're only writing about them because they're advertisers or things like that. And it's like I can honestly wake up every morning and be like, nope, we're doing this because this is the right thing to do. And it's a lot of fun. I've never been an editor before, but it's been a fun challenge, and we have such a great team that every day wakes up and in the middle of the afternoon because we were out late the night before, and we try to do our very best of journalism. A lot of people say beer journalism, and I'm like, that's nonsense. It's journalism. We just happen to cover beer.
Yeah. And the readership is consumer, basically, or the industry and...
we count most of the breweries in the U.S. as subscribers. A lot of people who are in the industry as subscribers, but the majority are beer fans. It's the people who are lined up here at Carton Brewing on a Saturday afternoon to buy beer. If they're coming out here, they're interested in what we're covering. And,
yeah, they look much more reputable than the people who are normally at a bar at noon. So I'm kind of glad about that.
Hands down.
Yeah. Farthest you've traveled on a beer assignment?
Oh, farthest I've traveled on a beer assignment.
I heard you once say something about New Zealand.
I did go to New Zealand. I gave the keynote speech inexplicably in 2014 at the New Zealand Brewers Guild Festival, which I still don't know why I was asked to do it. And half the room was, 2/3 of the room was confused because they had never heard of me or the magazine. But yeah, that was probably the furthest trip. I went to Antarctica a few years ago with my wife, and we brought some beer along, and we did a beer tasting on the ship in Antarctica. That was fun. So Ushuaia is the southernmost city in the U.S. in South America, down in Argentina. And after being 2 weeks on sea, we came off. My wife works for the company, the cruise company that was there. We're at a bar with all of the staff, and a brewer recognized me and said, "You must come to my brewery." And he had a brewery in Ushuaia, and so we all trekked over to the brewery and had some pints, and that was a lot of fun. But
I could write off the trip.
Yeah, I think probably the coolest place that I've gone on assignment though for the magazine was just last month when I went to Cuba, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I read your piece on that. It was pretty illuminating.
Thanks. Yeah, it was. It's something that I ever since Obama started. Trying to change the relations. It's something where I wanted to be there for the magazine to document the beer scene, and it's a country that is absolutely frozen in time. It's frozen in 1961, and now that the U.S. is coming in more and more and more, and the borders are being open, I think it's going to lose a lot of that identity, and I hope it doesn't, but I feel it probably will. So it was great to see how it is right now, and it's everything you expect from the architecture to the cars to just sort of the everyday culture of things, and the beer is also stuck in 1961, where it is all very much industrial lagers that have no real taste to them, but nobody knows anything different, and,
right.
And that's all right. That'll change. Beer is universal. Beer doesn't know politics. Beer doesn't know gender. Beer doesn't know orientation. So good beer is good beer, and I feel like it'll reach Cuban shores pretty soon.
Yeah, to me, one of the funnier parts of the article was apparently an earlier visitor had brought some flavored craft beers, and that just did not go over.
Yeah, no, I they were very polite about it, but yeah, it's
too early.
Yeah, but these are beers that I myself and a lot of other people who enjoy the various beers that are out there. Map of the Sun from Rare Barrel is the beer, and would. It's a fun beer. If I saw that out, if I was traveling, I'd be like, oh yes, I'm going to have that. And, but it's not for everybody, as we learned.
Yeah, and again, people who were basically trapped 50 plus years ago. So, weirdest ingredient that worked in a beer?
Oh, that worked in a beer.
Yeah, and the weirdest one that didn't. But first the weirdest thing you've heard is an ingredient that you're like, wow, that actually, I did not expect that to happen.
Boy, that throws me off because most times people will ask me weirdest ingredient that turned you off, and I have 5 answers ready for that one. That worked.
That you were skeptical and said, "There's no way on earth," but
boy, you're totally stumping me right now. I'm thinking a lot about teas. There's certain teas that are out there that have worked. I've had some really fun spices as well, like garden herbs. There's a really nice beer of it's a Simon and Garfunkel-esque parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, and it does smell a lot like marijuana when it goes into the saison, that Dogfish Victory and Stone brewed. But that actually has a really wonderful nose on it, and that probably it's not a great answer, and I'll try to think of something else because I've had some really weird stuff that there's mushroom beers that are out there these days, and some of them smell like
everything you'd be afraid of.
Yeah, like mildew in the shower, or there are. I once had a beer brewed with grilled beef hearts that smelled like a bloody, tinny butcher shop. That wasn't all that great. There's been beer. That's probably the weirdest thing that I thought wasn't going to work was Rogue Brewing made a beer with yeast harvested from the brewmaster's beard. I know. It's
They did make one of the worst gins I've ever tried.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a rogue that it was just awful. I forget what the big botanical thing was.
Yeah.
But beard yeast. That sounds
beard
bad
yeast.
too.
So yeah, and actually, and I was saying to them beforehand, well, how do you describe it? And they're like, you just have to taste it. And it's this really kind of nice golden ale, effervescent sort of Belgian style golden ale, and I dug it. I thought it was pretty cool. So that's probably the weirdest one that worked.
Okay. But the ones that failed are generally the mildew.
Yeah, pretty
ones.
much the mildew, the meats in it. Dogfish Head down in Delaware once brewed a beer with moon rocks, which was kind of weird. So yeah, there's some things like squid ink, catnip. There's all sorts of, if you can eat it, or it can almost be consumed, brewers have probably brewed with it. So yeah.
Yeah. What do you think accounts for the proliferation of craft beer?
Desire by the consumer, and it's another creative outlet. It's like being a chef. It's closer to being a baker because you really have to be exact in your measurements. You can't just riff in the kitchen
it's a
like a chef
process-oriented.
does. Exactly. But I think that there's a lot of created food-minded types. I mean, Carton Brewing is certainly one of those breweries where, Augie here comes up with ideas. He's made a beer that tastes like a panzanella salad. That use this sort of oniony, garlicky hop that's in it, and freeze-dried tomatoes, and some other things in the beer, and you kind of get this some fresh basil, some really nice things off it. He does another beer that tastes like a coffee with cream. Milk and sugar, so a regular coffee he calls it, and it's a little darker than this, but and it tastes like drinking a cold cup of coffee with cream and sugar from Dunkin' Donuts. And it's so I think there's just a lot of creativity, and there's a lot of consumers who want to support that creativity.
And trust me, I think I sent you a picture of my year of gin back in, I think 2010, 2011, conveniently a year or so before I quit drinking.
Right.
That was basically, I'll just keep doing these weird artisanal ones that I've never tried before every month. Somehow it added up to more than 12 bottles, though. But still, it was interesting seeing the types of things people tried to do. With gin, I think it's a much more stripped-down idea. You only have a certain sequence of botanicals that you're working with. It sounds
agreed.
like beer is a much more complicated
I think so.
process.
I think so. Well, the distillers might disagree with that. I think it's a different process.
Okay.
But there's certainly it's labor-intensive. It has to be creative, and there's so much blank canvas to work with. There's so many different malt varietals. There's so many different yeast strains. There's so many different hop varieties and types out there these days. And even water can be different from one town to the next. Hard water, soft water, iron, heavy, minerally. I mean, there's so many different things that there's so much to work with. It's not just 4 ingredients, it's how you work them, and it's picking the right ones.
And how tough was it for you learning the language of this?
I'm still learning.
Yeah,
I'm still learning. Again, I haven't spent time in working in a brewery, but I've spent a lot of time in breweries and have helped make beers. And but the guys who do it day in and day out, I'm always learning from them. I'm always reading technical manuals. You can't ever stop not learning your subject matter. It's again, it goes back to journalism. If you're covering city government, you need to know everything about the city. If you're on the environmental sciences beat, you need to be reading all of the technical journals that the people that you're interviewing are reading, so you know how to ask the right questions. And so, I'm continuously trying to, and I try to talk to all the reporters that work for the magazine about that as well. And even if I'm not writing anymore, I think a lot of the stuff that I'm learning, I'm trying to push into the stories and say, well, hey, we're going to do the story on this. I remember talking to this guy who did this thing this one time. Why don't you call him up? And so it kind of helps in that way as well. But
the term Rolodex is outdated, but it's still...
Oh, it's still apt. Hands down.
Yeah. Holy Grail? Beer that you'd want to try that, I assume somewhere overseas you're not going to be able to get it shipped here? Is there any, legendary type thing?
No, I don't. I've been fortunate in my career to have a lot of different beers and to drink some very rare and very hard to get beers. But I don't go chasing. In the industry, they call them whales.
Yeah.
I don't go chasing whales. I never. It's not in my DNA. So I'm always looking for the next fun and easy experience with friends or new friends or brewers where I can have a well-made pint and just have a good time. I remember the memories of hanging out with people better than often sometimes the liquid in the glass.
Yeah, how important is drinking at home versus drinking, or having a beer in a place like this, in a nice brewery? How important is the location?
I think very important.
Yeah.
I think there's something nice about a comfortable chair at home and a good book and a nice beer that's sort of playing a background part. But then there's also a lot of fun in the communal aspect of getting together with like-minded people and people everybody who's walking through the door today is here for the beer. Mm-hmm. And they're going to find people who are also here for the beer, and that just sort of lends to a good time. And so, yeah.
They'll also be here for Dishing Up New Jersey.
Also here for Dishing Up New Jersey, but probably the beer first.
Yeah, But I'll let you get back to the signing table.
Thanks so much.
John Holl, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual Memories Show.
It's a real pleasure. This is a lot of fun.
And that was John Holl. Visit johnholl.com to find out more about John's work, the latest features in All About Beer, his TV and podcast appearances, and more. And again, that's JOHNHOLL. So Holl is HOLL, .com. And make sure you pick up Dishing Up New Jersey from Story Publishing. That'll be available next week on Amazon, at least according to Amazon, and in bookstores everywhere. Oh, and you can find Carton Brewing at cartonbrewing.com. That's CARTON. And again, that place is in Atlantic Highlands. John raves about the beer. Amy tried a couple of them while she was there and enjoyed the heck out of them. Now, after the main conversation, I asked John, so, who are you reading? And if you want to hear his answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our monthly podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. You can do that at patreon.com/VMSpod, or you can hit paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for supporters of the show. We're a few dollars away from hitting our first tier, which means we can safely say we're supporting the show's financial spend. And the goodies include the podcast, the bonus podcast, the patron-only blog with lists of books that we discussed and other neat stuff, the new work by past guests feature, which people really dig when they get to find articles and books and other stuff from some of our guests. I'm also, if we hit a certain level, planning to launch a series of ebooks where we do transcriptions of some of the interviews here. There's some demand for that, but that's also going to take some expense or some effort to put together. So if we can hit a certain dollar level within patreon.com, I will commit to putting out an ebook a month. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. And if you don't like Patreon, just go to paypal.me/VMSpod and make a donation that way. You can either do one time or recurring. And if you do, you'll get access to the same material through fearofasquareplanet.com. A special thanks go out to our supporters Paul W. Jones, Michael Janizik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Andrew Mason, and Zach Martin for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. There's a full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Now, this episode, like I mentioned, was recorded at the Carton Brewery in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. Tolls were like $3 total, so it was more gas money. Also, Amy and I got some coffee beforehand at the Flaky Tart around the corner from Carton Brewing, along with this amazing carrot and cheesecake called Slice of Heaven. So that was something. And if you want to help defray some of that, you can visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. Our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Baerwald, used with permission from the artist. David's got a reunion project going with his great 80s band, David and David. You should make sure you listen to Boomtown, the one album that they did. And you can find out more and support the reunion at facebook.com/DavidandDavidMusic. And that's it for this week's Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. I haven't recorded next week's show yet, so I can't promise we'll have one, but I'm hoping to have a session with Harry Katz, the former comics curator for the Library of Congress. If we can't get together, Well, it's anyone's guess. I'll be away this weekend at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and I'm planning to record a bunch of shows while I'm there, but I'd like to hold those out until after I get back, instead of rushing through one that Monday when I get in. Anyway, until next time, you can subscribe to the show and download our past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter at VMSPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. That'll help us build a bigger audience. Until next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.